The woman's coffee had gone cold nearly 20 minutes ago, but she hadn't noticed. Her hands trembled around the untouched ceramic cup as tears slipped silently down her cheeks, disappearing into the soft lavender fabric of her scrubs. Around her, the cafe pulsed with life, espresso machines hissing, plates clinking, strangers laughing beneath the golden glow of hanging lights. It was the kind of warm, cheerful evening that should have felt comforting. But for her, the world had gone unbearably quiet. 3 hours earlier, she had stood in a hospital room holding her mother's hand as the monitors fell silent. 3 hours since the only person who had ever called her, "my brave little princess," had taken her final breath. And now here she was, sitting in a crowded cafe she hadn't meant to enter, staring blankly at nothing because going home meant facing the empty apartment, the untouched voicemail, the silence where her mother's voice should have been. Before we continue, if you believe every story hides a lesson waiting to be discovered, take a moment to like this video, comment below, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Stories for more unforgettable moments like this. She had chosen the cafe because it was halfway between the hospital and home. A place to sit, to delay reality for just a little longer. The grief sat on her chest like stone. Her mother had been everything. The woman who worked double shifts to put her through nursing school. The woman who clipped coupons to buy her birthday presents. The woman who had held her through heartbreak, through failure, through every storm life had sent. And now she was gone. The young nurse sat frozen, staring at the foam art dissolving on her latte, remembering the last thing her mother had whispered. "Don't let sadness make your world small, princess." The words haunted her. How was she supposed to keep her world open when it had just shattered? That was when she felt the tiny touch on her shoulder. Soft, hesitant. She turned, startled, her vision blurred with tears. Standing beside her was a little girl no older than 5, with wild brown curls framing her small face and bright curious eyes filled with concern too genuine to be rehearsed. She wore a peach-colored jacket slightly too big for her tiny frame, and her little sneakers blinked with lights each time she shifted her feet. The child tilted her head, studying the woman with the kind of solemn seriousness only children can manage. Then, in a voice so gentle it barely rose above the cafe noise, she asked if she looked sad and whether she needed a hug. For a second, the woman couldn't respond. The question pierced through the fog of her grief with startling clarity. No awkwardness, no hesitation, no adult discomfort around pain. Just pure, simple kindness. The woman's lips trembled as she gave the smallest nod. And then the little girl wrapped her tiny arms around her neck. It wasn't a long hug. It wasn't dramatic. It was just small, warm, and impossibly sincere. But it broke something open. The nurse began to sob. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd been holding back all evening, but raw, uncontrollable grief that shook her entire body. The little girl held on tighter. The cafe grew still. Conversation softened. Heads turned. And standing a few feet away, holding a takeout tray, was the little girl's father. He looked startled, then apologetic, as though unsure whether to interrupt. But when he saw the woman collapse into tears against his daughter's shoulder, his expression changed. He understood. He slowly set the tray down and gave them space. Minutes passed. The woman eventually pulled back, embarrassed, wiping her face as she tried to apologize. But the little girl only smiled. Then, she said something that made the woman's breath catch. She explained that her mommy used to call her princess too, and that whenever she was sad, mommy would hug her until the sadness got tired and went away. The words hit like lightning. The woman stared at the child, unable to speak. The father stepped forward then, his own face shadowed by something heavy and familiar. Quietly, he explained that his wife had passed away the year before. Cancer. Their daughter had been 4. Since then, she had made it her mission to hug anyone who looked sad because she believed hugs were how broken hearts remembered how to beat properly again. The woman felt fresh tears gather. Not from pain this time, but from the unbearable tenderness of it all. Here was this child, carrying her own loss, somehow choosing softness instead of bitterness. The father offered to sit with her. Normally, she would have refused. But grief had already stripped away her defenses. So they sat, and for the next hour, beneath the warm cafe lights, 3 strangers shared stories. The nurse spoke about her mother, her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she sang terribly while cooking breakfast. The father spoke of his wife's endless optimism, of how she used to dance in the kitchen with their daughter balanced on her feet. The little girl contributed occasional solemn observations about how heaven was probably full of pancakes and puppies. For the first time since that morning, the woman laughed. A real laugh, unexpected and fragile, but real. And it felt almost disloyal. Almost wrong, yet somehow necessary, as though grief and joy had made room for each other at the same table. Before they left, the little girl pressed something into her hand. A tiny plastic tiara, slightly bent, one fake jewel missing. She said every princess needed a crown, especially sad ones. The nurse tried to protest, but the child insisted. So she accepted it. That night, she placed the tiny tiara beside her mother's framed photograph. And for the first time since the hospital room went silent, she slept. Days turned into weeks, then months. The pain didn't disappear. It changed shape, softened at the edges, and every now and then, when the grief returned sharp and sudden, she would look at that little plastic crown and remember that cafe. Remember the hug. Remember that sometimes healing enters your life not as a grand revelation, but as a child with blinking sneakers and a heart too big for her tiny chest. Nearly a year later, on the anniversary of her mother's passing, she returned to the same cafe. The plastic tiara sat in her bag. She wasn't sure why she came. Maybe memory, maybe hope, and there they were. The father, reading at a corner table. The little girl, now slightly taller, carefully decorating a muffin with too many sprinkles. When the child saw her, recognition lit up her face like sunrise. She ran straight into her arms. This time, it was the nurse who held on tightly. If this story touched your heart, comment, kindness still exists, right now before the ending. Your words might remind someone out there that even the smallest act of compassion can change a life. As they sat together again, the nurse reached into her bag and handed the little girl a velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver tiara necklace. Not expensive, but beautiful. The little girl gasped. The nurse smiled through tears and told her that some princesses don't wear crowns on their heads. Some wear them in their hearts. And some share them with the world. If this story made you feel something, hope, sadness, warmth, or simply reminded you of someone you miss, please like, share, and tell us in the comments. Your story matters too. That night, walking home beneath the city lights, the nurse realized something her mother had always known. Sadness had not made her world small. Kindness had made it bigger. And somewhere, she could almost hear her mother's voice carried softly on the wind, still calling her what she had always been. Princess.